Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel. If you're stopping for the first time, you're welcome. In today's video, we'll be doing the sewing tutorial for our stylish keyhole bustier. I'll be dropping the pattern drafting in the description. You can go ahead and watch it. If this is what you're interested in learning, watch to the end and subscribe. So let's get started. Okay guys, what I simply did here was to cut our main fabric using the pattern that we drafted, and then I went ahead to fuse or to stabilize this fabric using an interface. Okay, you can either use a cloth gum or an stay depending on what is available. So for me, I made use of a cloth gum. I fused it on the main fabric and then on the lining as well. So this is the pattern of the fabric for the front and the back, and we also have the second one too. So what I'll simply do here is to go ahead and cut the peplum first. So let's start with the peplum before we proceed with the other part of the bustier blouse. So I went ahead to place my fabric on a 360-degree fold. You know, a 360-degree fold is different from the 180 degrees. And then I went ahead to determine the radius. From the radius, I determined the length of the peplum. The length of the peplum is 8 inches. So I added additional 1 inch for the joining of the upper and lower side, okay, which is for the seam allowance. So this is what we have. I'll go ahead and use this pattern to cut out on the lining as well. So right here, what I simply did was to use the wording on the front pattern. Okay, have in mind that the bustier is 2 for the front. If you drafted the pattern with me, we have 2 bustier for the front, or we have 2 patterns for the front. Okay, so I simply went ahead to cut the wording for the front pattern. I'm just trimming out the excess wording for the side front. So I'll go in by 4.5 or 5 inches so that the wording doesn't get into the armhole. Okay, so after trimming out the excess around the side front, I'll still go in a bit and curve it so that it doesn't get into the armhole, okay, giving this bust curve around this area. So I also do the same for the second part of the side front, trim out the excess and then draft a perfect cup for the front pattern. I have a detailed tutorial on cutting out wording on some of my tutorials. I've done this by Queen Anne's neckline bustier. I took my time to explain, and also in my 6 pieces gown I also took my time to explain. So you can go ahead and watch some of my videos. So what I'll simply do next, guys, is to join the same parts of the peplum. Okay, so I'm joining the lower part of the peplum that we drafted, because I've cut out the main fabric and the lining for the peplum, and for the lining I fused with a peplum stay or a thick paper stay, and then for the main fabric I used the cloth gum or an air stay depending on what you have. So I went ahead to join the lower part of the peplum using my sewing machine. So what I'll simply do next is to use my crinoline when turning. So I shift I moved the seam allowance to the lining. So the one with the paper stay or the peplum stay is the lining. So when I move the seam allowance to the lining, I'll simply place my crinoline on the seam while bending. Why bending it? How do I explain this properly so that everybody can understand? So you move your seam to the lining and then you place your crinoline and then you top stitch. Okay, so that's what I simply did. I relaxed my seam to the lining, and then at the same time I secured my crinoline to it. So I'll quickly do this and then move over to the next stage, guys. So guys, while doing this, I'll also explain that there are a couple of ways you can also attach your crinoline. Some people tend to join it with their when closing up the lower part and then move it to the other side of the lining. Okay, while in some other case you can choose to close up the seam and then attach your crinoline while moving your seam to the lining. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, if I'm not making sense, or if you don't understand what I'm trying to explain, please leave your comments. Drop your comments in the comment section. Okay, so the next thing I simply did, and don't forget to give it a good press and then top stitch. Okay, So what I simply did here is to join the front panel of the main fabric. So I work with my pins all the time, no matter how perfect or how professional you tend to be. Always try to work with your pins. It kind of guides you to understand what you intend to create. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stitch one side, and then I will notch the underbust. It's very important so that you're losing the grip at that area because it's a curve, and then you also notch the bust point. Okay, so just notch so that it relaxes properly. You won't find it a bit stiff around the bust area. So I'll go ahead and then also use a pin for the other side, and then I'll go ahead and join it properly. After joining it, I'll go ahead and also notch this point, the underbust and the bust points, and then this is what we have. So you give it a good press. Please don't forget to give it a good press. So this is the second bustier, the second part of the bustier, the second front bustier. So I'm closing up the neckline. You can see that I worked with my pins first. I'm closing up the neckline. After closing up the neckline, I'll go ahead and open it up to relax my seam, and then I'll go ahead and top stitch. So you can see that I relaxed my seam towards the lining, okay, so that the neckline can relax properly. So what I intend to do for next is to give it a good press. This is not just all to close on the front part. I'll use my pin to relax it properly so that we can see. So I'll give it a good press. You notch it, give it a good press, and then I'll close the lower section after giving it a good press. Okay, so I'll close this lower section, leaving just the armhole. You're going to turn it through the armhole after closing the lower section. So guys, this is the lining for the front bustier. I'll do the same just like I did for the main fabric. You work with your pins, secure the side to the center front, and then you go ahead and stitch it up. Okay, I also fused an interface and I stabilized my lining using a cloth gum. You can use a cloth gum and you can use an stay depending on what it's available. So I'll also give this a good press. Don't forget to notch and give a good press, guys. So this is the back panel. I also fused with an interface for the main fabric, excluding the lining. So I'm going to be joining this. Please fuse, stabilize your fabric so that your cloth looks the grip looks good and well stabilized on your body. If you don't use an interfacing for your clothes, it tends to look kind of, it gives it this low quality and gives it this unstable look on your body. Okay, and besides, the durability, it won't be so durable. You won't use it for a reasonable period. Okay, so I'll go ahead and also notch after joining the panels for the back, and then I'll give it a good press, guys. Okay guys, so I simply went ahead to also join the lining of the back panel. Okay, it's also a princess bustier, so that is why it's advisable that you also watch the pattern drafting so that you understand the sewing process. Okay, it works together. Okay, you need to understand the pattern first before understanding the sewing tutorial. So what I simply did here was to turn the back pattern using the lining. Okay, so at this point I'm closing the zipper area, the neckline, and then the side back. Okay, so it's very important that you relax your seam first before closing up, turning your main fabric with your lining. Okay, relax the seam line of the main fabric and the seam line of the lining. So after turning, you notch it properly, trim out the excess fabric, and then you go ahead and turn using the waist area. Okay, you can either turn through the armhole or you turn through your waistline, guys. So the next thing I'll simply do is to use my my lining to also turn the main fabric. And if you notice, this is the point where I'm merging the first bustier to the second bustier. So I kind of gripped their armhole together because I'll be using a sleeve, and the sleeve must capture both the first and the second bustier. So after gripping the armhole, merge the armhole of the first and the second pattern. I also ensure that the waist, the side front of the first is also merging with the side front of the second pattern. Please understand this process. That is why I said you should watch the pattern drafting first before having to understand the sewing process. So after merging the front pattern to the second with the second pattern, I will then use my seam. I will then use my lining to turn the front, the neckline, and the side. So the lining captures the neckline and also captures the front, the side front of the first and the second pattern. So it turns it up simultaneously. Okay, so I'm going to close up the neckline, top stitch, relax my seam, and then I'll go ahead and close the sides. So the lining has captured both the front pattern and the second pattern, making them become one. Okay, so guys, this is what we have. I'm going to be turning it. After turning it, after relaxing your seam and trimming out your excess fabric, you turn it and then give it a good press. So this is what we have. After giving it a good press, you can see that the armhole, I didn't close the armhole, but I closed up the side. So the lining has merged both the front pattern, the front first pattern and the second pattern. So this is exactly what we have when your cup is lifted, okay? Because you can see that it's merging, but if it's relaxed, it looks like it's spread, it's not together. But by the time you wear it, you can see that the shoulders, the meeting point of that shoulder with join, or we merge. How do I explain it? So guys, I'll go ahead and bring out the zipper allowance for the back panel. So I'm using my pin to secure it. The same allowance is now 1 inch. After using half an inch to close up the back, I'll use my temporary stitch to run on the zipper area. The zipper allowance of 1 inch is a temporary stitch so that you can loosen it up, you can open it. So guys, after joining it, I'll go ahead and join my shoulder of the front pattern with the back pattern. So just use your lining to turn it. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm using the lining of the back pattern, flipping it over, and then using it to close up the shoulder. Okay guys, so after I was done closing up the shoulder, I went ahead to open up my zipper allowance. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, it's a temporary stitch. Then I went ahead to give my shoulder area a good press so that it can relax properly. Okay, so the next thing I simply did was to attach my sleeve. This is a simple unfitted sleeve, basic sleeve. It is not a bell sleeve, just like what we saw on the thumbnail. I have a detailed tutorial on how to make a trumpet or a bell sleeve. I'll also leave the link in the description so that if you're interested, you can go ahead and watch the tutorial, just in case you want to use a bell sleeve for this tutorial. Okay guys, so what I simply did next was to close the sides. After attaching my sleeve, I usually close my sides along with my sleeve. You can close up your sides and then attach your sleeve depending on what works for you or your mood for that day. So, but what I simply did here was to place my bust measurement, the under bust and the waist measurement, and then I closed up the side. Just run your stitch from your armhole, from your sleeve length, cutting through your armhole and then down to the sides. And then I went ahead to secure my peplum to the blouse, the major upper blouse, and then I used my sewing machine to stitch it. So this is an end result. Thank you so much guys for watching to the end. I'll see you in my next tutorial. God bless you guys. Like, share and subscribe.